All right, Leroy. Who's the one and only master?
Before we begin, if you want to see music bios or more good videos like this, hit the subscribe button. Also, I've started a Patreon account. On here you get more copyrighted material and they'll be uploaded 48 hours prior to YouTube. If you want to support or visit, link is in the description. And without further ado, on to our feature presentation. Leroy Green is a martial artist with a lot of talent. He gets most of his inspiration from Bruce Lee. Legend has it he could catch bullets with his teeth and slice arrows aimed at his direction. His master tells him that he reached the final level and is unable to accompany him on his mission. He gives him a buckle and says this is the ticket to the final level. But in the meantime, Leroy goes to the movie and watches idol Bruce Lee in action. The movie gets interrupted by two street dancers with their beatbox. I guess this is how movie theaters were in 1985, but one man had enough and breaks the beatbox like Bruce Lee did. The movie again gets interrupted with the entrance of Sho'Nuff of Harlem, who's the meanest, prettiest, and true master. He's looking for Bruce Leroy, who taunts him until the patrons tell Nuff to sit down and shut up.
What? Why don't I sit down and what?
I said, why don't you sit down and shut up?
Why don't...
But he and his posse goes to war with the rest of the theater. Leroy leaves the theater as he has no desire to fight him today. Subplot time. Eddie Arkadian is a music producer who wants to put his girlfriend Angela Viccario's video on Laura Charles' show, Seventh Heaven. During her show, she displays DeBarge's only music video to date called Rhythm of the Night. Laura is told of Eddie Arkadian as he wants to meet with her, but Laura is extremely selective on which videos can air on her show, as she should. After her show, she gets in a taxi and expects her regular driver Sal to take her home, but Sal is sick and posing as him are Arkadian's henchmen to kidnap Laura.
How you doing tonight, Sal?
You just sit back and relax. Sal got sick.
Hey, what do you think you're doing?
The right thing, Miss Charles.
She gets a save from Leroy, who karate chops all of the henchmen, and during this, she gets the googly eye effect for Leroy. But Leroy loses his medallion in the process that Laura picks up. The henchman shows up with no Laura, disappointing Eddie. He will recruit his bodyguard to try and kidnap Laura the next day. At his class, we meet Johnny, who can't fight a lick. Sho'Nuff and his gang barges in for lessons, but Leroy is unfazed. Johnny intervenes and nearly gets his neck snapped. Leroy bows down to Nuff to save Johnny, and it goes to show you that he cares for those close to him.
Sometimes it is hard to live the way of the wise. Huh?
The next scene, we meet his family, and his brother Richie teases him. Richie spots Laura on TV and Leroy wants to see her, but Richie doesn't want to be seen with him. At her studio, Leroy spots Laura getting kidnapped again by Rock, which is Arkadian's main bodyguard. But Dum Dum left a hint for Leroy to find Laura's location. We are then shown the monstrosity video Angela is featured in. After the video, Laura says no for reasons I mentioned earlier. Arkadian threatens to do worse to Laura, and that's when an unknown ninja comes in to save the day. The ninja is revealed to be Leroy, and Leroy puts Eddie's head in the shark tank. And this is where Eddie's psyche is changed forever, as now his motivation shifts from putting his video into Laura's show into ceasing Leroy's entire existence. Leroy is taken to Laura's apartment and is retrieved his medallion. As Laura's thirst levels increase, Leroy isn't catching any hints that she is into him as he departs. Leroy then finds the master some dumb goy, but is turned away. Meanwhile, Sho'Nuff shows up to Leroy Green Sr.'s pizza establishment, but Nuff leaves him a message by destroying his business and even destroys his TV, which is showing Angela's terrible video. Leroy then shows up a second too late, and Richie calls him a coward as he believes Leroy is scared of Sho'Nuff.
Sho'Nuff happened, that's what. And it's all because of you. Everyone knows you're scared of him. Kissed his shoes and everything. What good is that kung fu job if you can't even use it? Coward.
Now Leroy has motivation to fight. While he's venting his frustrations, Laura offers Leroy to become her bodyguard. Her thirst levels is up again, but he turns it down as he's on a spiritual mission. Eddie is recruiting men to harm Leroy, and Angela catches wind of this. She doesn't want anyone to get harmed at the expense of her stardom, but Arcadian is on that Tommy Mottola levels of insanity as Angela leaves. Arcadian then finds his prize with Sho'Nuff, who is willing to do it for free to take out Leroy. Laura takes Leroy to her studio for some private time. She shows him Bruce Lee's film Fist of Fury. They share a kiss, but after looking at a scene where Bruce Lee is disguising himself, Leroy gets an idea on how to deal with some Dom Goy establishment. Unbeknownst to them, they were spied by Richie, Cole, and their third friend. As soon as Leroy leaves, she is confronted by Eddie Arcadian, who ties her up, as well as Richie. Leroy disguised himself as a pizza delivery man to get into some Dom Goy, and this is where we find out that the master is a fortune cookie machine. Before she departs, Angela stops by looking for Leroy, but warns Johnny about her ex-boyfriend.
You gotta tell Mr. Leroy that he better stay away from 7th Heaven.
Leroy goes to his former master for answers, as he tells him that it is in him to find the true master.
There is one place that you have not yet looked, and it is there, only there, that you shall find the master.
Johnny tells Leroy about 7th Heaven and heads for that area. Johnny tries to thwart him, but is unsuccessful. Leroy shows up to find a ton of men out to get him, an unfair fight. As soon as he feels like this is too many men to take on, his students come in to save the day. Johnny puts on his best display yet, and Richie breakdances through his ropes. Eddie used Laura as bait to lure Leroy to his next destination, and this is where Leroy is finally confronted by Sho'Nuff. Nuff had the upper hand until Leroy sticks Nuff with the door, but it is here where Leroy finds out that Nuff has the glow Leroy has been seeking. Nuff beats Leroy into oblivion until Leroy caves in by saying he's the master. While Nuff attempts to drown Leroy, he realizes his master was right about where to find the master. He finally caves in, telling Nuff that he's the master.
All right, Leroy. Who's the one and only master?
I am.
He uses his newly found glow to defeat Nuff, but shows his sincerity and doesn't drown him. Unwilling to accept defeat, Arcadian does what he should have done if he wanted to take care of Leroy and shoots him. But Leroy caught the bullet with his teeth, and Arcadian is arrested for attempted murder, and Leroy disappears. Saddened about his disappearance, Leroy shows up at 7th Heaven to surprise Laura, but once again taught some moves.
Could you teach me some moves?
And they live happily ever after. That is until he cheats on her with Miss Nasty. I'm just kidding. In all honesty, this is a top 10 movie in my catalog. Everyone has done a great job in this movie, especially Taimak, Julius Carey, and Vanity. And rest in peace to the last two names that I mentioned. But I do got some thoughts that I saved for the end of the movie. First of all, Sho'Nuff is weak. Every time he's in the presence of Leroy, provoked or unprovoked, he has to bring his posse with him to apply some force. You wanted to fight Leroy so bad, why bring your posse? And the one time he got you alone, you lose. Next we have Eddie Tommy Mottola Arcadian. And this guy is psycho, all because he wanted to put his girlfriend's video on Laura Charles' show. Then Leroy put his head in the Shark Tank, his psyche changes forever, to the point where he wants to pay anyone to kill Leroy. But like Nuff, he too is a coward because he couldn't do it himself until the very end. If you want something done, do it yourself. Finally, there's Laura Charles, the damsel in distress. I said she was thirsty for Leroy, and he never caught any hints until the end, of course. And finally, I was introduced to this movie through TV1's show Unsung and became a victim of false advertisement. I thought the DeBarge family had a bigger part in this movie, but after their little segment, we never see them again. But those are just some of my thoughts I noticed while rewatching the film, and you should too. And that concludes The Last Dragon review. Tell me what y'all think in the comments below. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Rest in peace to all the actors who died from this film. Too many to name here. And I'll see you next time.